Good afternoon, and welcome to the June webinar here in our webinar series for the New York Association on Independent Living, the Olmstead at 25, Protecting and Strengthening Its Future. I'm Blaise Bryant, the Communications Specialist for the Association. I will also be facilitating today's panel discussion. So a couple of quick housekeeping things. The webinar is being recorded. I know that shows up on the screen as well, and the recording will be made available later on, both sent to you as a link and on our website, ilny.org. The chat is also disabled for participants, and this is a screen reader accessibility accommodation. So to put your questions in the box, you can do so in the Q&A box on your screen, or if you are using a screen reader, tab to the question and answer box, and you should be able to type them in. So without any further ado, we have a rock star panel here. I'm going to, in the interest of chivalry here, I'm going to first introduce Shelly Madore, who is the director of Olmstead for New York State. Shelly, thank you so much for being here.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And sitting across from me here at my dining room table is Cliff Perez, the systems advocate with the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley. Hey, Cliff, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And also from the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley and formerly with Disability Rights New York is Sim Goldman. Sim, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So Shelly, I want to start with you. And this is a question I'm going to pose to all three of you. When you heard about Olmstead and the Supreme Court case in 1999, Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson winning their case for community integration, what went through your head? What was your initial, or what were your initial thoughts? So I'll do this with Shelly, to Cliff, and then to Sim.
Hey, well, I'm going to share a little personal story with you regarding this. My life has been very intertwined with not only passage of the ADA in 1990, but also the Olmstead decision in 1999. My daughter was born on July 31st, 1990, just a couple of days after the ADA was passed. So my children have always lived under the what I thought at the time was the protection umbrella of the ADA. Once they entered school, of course, I learned that there were a lot of holes in that umbrella. And then when we had the passage of the Supreme Court decision for Olmstead, at that point, I was already thinking about their adulthood and what that was going to look like, and what were the steps I needed to take to ensure that they could live lives of self-determination and independence. So that is really what started my political career. From there, working with the Centers for Independent Living here in Minnesota, and then also leading up the Olmstead Implementation Office here in Minnesota. And I heard of this wonderful opportunity here in New York to build a transformative plan. And here I am today, hoping to be able to round out my career by doing exactly that. So it's just been it's been the pathway. It's been like this, but it's always been with a straight arrow to get to an end.
Fantastic. And I look forward to learning more here in the future, Shelly. Cliff, over to you.
You're muted.
Could I unmute? Very good. Sorry about that. So for me, I mean, I was at the signing of the ADA, so it has a lot more meaning for me in that respect. You know, I was doing a lot with many other people, obviously, to get the ADA passed. So when this decision came down, to me, the first thought that came to me was that, okay, if the Supreme Court can actually understand what, sort of what was the spirit or what is actually meant when the ADA talked about providing access to people with disabilities, and the whole idea of living integrated within the community, that the courts saw that and acknowledged that. That to me was a wonderful thing. But then I started thinking, of course, well, okay, so the decision is great, but one, we had this law passed, and then we needed to have somebody take their state to court to implement, what the law says they should be doing. So that, I'm always concerned about that kind of thing, because then I'm thinking after the decision was, and in New York, we've had to fight for so many things in New York. We've had to fight to get HAWA passed, and we've had to fight to get voting. It's never come easy. And I remember when the MISC was established, the most integrated setting coordinating council. I remember turning to a fellow disability rights advocate. Oh my God, what was his name? He used to do employment stuff. Frank. And I said, yes, Frank Panisi. Thank you, Sam. And we both looked at each other and said, well, what that means, yes, the formation of a committee, it means that nothing is going to happen for many years. And to me, here we are going on the 25th anniversary, right? And from my perspective, anyway, at least, not much has happened at all. So that's my thought on that.
All right, Cliff, thank you very much. And Sim, over to you.
Thank you, Blaze. Supreme Court was considering the Olmstead decision before they issued it. I was very concerned about what they were going to do with that lower court decision that came out of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. The case originated in the state of Georgia, and the state and the federal district court, the trial court down there, issued a very sweeping decision upholding this regulation. It's important to remember that Olmstead is not based on anything actually in the ADA. It's based on it's based generally on the introduction to the ADA and hortatory aspirational language, but there's nothing in the ADA that specifically says there's a right to live in the most integrated setting. It was a regulation promulgated by the United States Department of Justice. And we didn't really know, what was going to happen at the Supreme Court. I mean, at the time, it seemed like it was a very conservative Supreme Court. By today's standards, it would not be, but it certainly appeared to be there then. So I had a lot of trepidation about it. There had also been another a fantastic decision, which you don't hear about anymore, out of the state of Pennsylvania called Helen L. v. Daddario, which involved the right of people to access home care to avoid institutionalization in the nursing facility. And that was just a wonderful, wide-reaching decision that the Supreme Court did not agree to take. As most of you know, I think know, but I'll just say it. The Supreme Court doesn't have to take every case that comes out of an appellate court, and in fact takes a very, very tiny percentage of it. So it chose not to take that one. It did choose to take Olmstead, which nobody knew at the time. I remember we were all kind of scratching our heads going, does this mean they're more likely to uphold it or more likely to reverse it or scale it back? And I think, as Cliff said, and and Shelly said, as good as the decision was, you should know that it was a scale back. It was a very qualified right, and there were several caveats put on the right to live in an integrated setting, and it clearly was not, as some people describe it, as a mandate to shut down institutions, fortunately or unfortunately. So I think it was somewhat misunderstood, but I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. So I was relieved at the decision. I thought it could have been worse, could have gone the other way. I also thought it could have been better, but given everything that was going on, and especially some of the language that was in the concurring opinion of Anthony Kennedy, which I thought was very helpful, I felt pretty good and positive about it at the time.
This is all really interesting. I want to follow up while we're on the topic of the Supreme Court here, as we've now fast forward 25 years since Olmstead, and you see some of the decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court lately as it pertains to basic human rights. And Cliff, I want to start with you. How concerned are you about the basic rights of people with disabilities being taken away? And the order I'm going to go here is Cliff, Shelly, and then to Sim.
Oh boy, I'm not muted, right? Yeah. It does concern me. Obviously, we've seen some other decisions out of the Supreme Court that have not been so enlightening, let's say. So obviously, it's always a matter of what cases get brought up, right? Because that's how that gets resolved. So it could be a bad thing, the way things are going, and giving the entire political bipolarness, I guess, that we've got going, that there seems to be so little negotiation and actual communication and understanding of one another, even if they don't agree with one another, like we had during the time of passage of the ADA, which we clearly do not have today. And the ADA would have never passed, and I'm not even sure that the Olmstead decision would have passed the way that was decided the way it was decided if it was brought today. So I am very concerned about the direction that we're going, as I said, not just regarding the Supreme Court, but I think overall, I think we're heading down a bad road.
Shelly, over to you.
Thank you. I have hope, so I guess I'm not going to say that I completely concur. However, I do believe that we are going down a path again where we are not inviting people with disabilities to be at the table to help make decisions or to make decisions that impact their lives. We've returned to this more paternalistic or this protectionism, that we've removed risk. We've removed choice because we call it risk. And what's happened with that is that we now have boxed ourselves in a corner of where people can live, how people can work, choices that people can make. We've seen an uptick across the country in guardianship. That's not being properly administrated or evaluated. We have courts that are overwhelmed. We still have school districts that their first choice for families is a guardianship discussion at age 14. There is a lack of training of jobs that are competitive integrated employment. We're still teaching basic jobs that are not going to be career based. We have plenty of jobs that are open for young people with computer skills, yet we aren't looking at any of those opportunities for young people with disabilities to engage in those career tracks. So I feel like we are at the right time in New York to be able to talk about these issues in that way and start to say, what can we do to do things differently? And that's the hope that I have, but I too have some concerns. I have 2 children with disabilities, and I will be honest, as I told you, I've always lived under what I thought was this protection umbrella, and I don't feel that it's there anymore. And I do have some concerns, and I carry that with me as we are beginning to do this heavy lifting of building our next Olmstead plan here in New York, and making sure that people are at the center of the plan. And what can we do to make sure that we are addressing people first, community first, classroom first, housing first, employment first, not as a secondary thought, but first placement in integrated settings.
I can't wait to have you share more, about that work
Me too.
here in a few minutes. So, Sim, over to you. And I really am interested, particularly in your perspective as a lawyer.
Well, I think lawyer or not, whether you're a lawyer or not, if you follow politics in the Supreme Court, you see the direction it's been going, and it's definitely taken a rightward turn. The thing that concerns me the most, and I'll try not to get too into the legal weeds, assuming most people on this webinar are not attorneys, is they're about to issue a decision which could implicate a case known as Chevron. And Chevron, quickly, was a Supreme Court decision in 1984 that established the principle that federal agencies have wide discretion to interpret laws as long as it's within the legal authority, of the law and consistent with the law. If Chevron deference, if Chevron is either implicitly or explicitly overturned, cases Chevron v. Natural Resources Defense Counsel, I feel confident, and I hate saying this, but I feel confident that if there's another Olmstead case that gets to the Supreme Court, they're going to throw out the integration mandate. There is at least a 5-person majority on the court who I think would likely say that unless Congress explicitly puts it in there, federal agencies are outside of their authority in doing this. I'm not 100% certain of this, nobody can be, but I'm very concerned, very, very, very concerned about it. So in that sense, I would say I'm pessimistic like Cliff. However, I'm more optimistic like Shelly because, excuse the phrase, but this may be the kick in the butt we all need. We have all been relying too much on the courts. The courts are very limited in what they can do. No one, not the courts, not the politicians, no one is going to give us power. We are going to have to take the power. And the only way to do that really is going to be in getting involved in the electoral process. As I know Cliff will definitely remember, the great advocate and leader during our fight, and both Cliff and I were down in Washington lobbying for the ADA, Justin Dart said, get involved with politics like your life depends on it, because it does. And what happened, and I'm speaking in broad generalities here, after the Olmstead decision and after the passage of the ADA and the passage of the Olmstead decision and having, most of that during the Clinton administration, I think we got passive. I know after Olmstead, everyone was saying, oh, this is going to be great. All we have to do is file a Department of Justice complaint and they're going to come in and fix everything. And being the natural contrarian that I remember saying to people, they're not going to do that. They just don't have the resources to do it. And that's only this particular, maybe the Clinton administration may be dedicated to that, but we don't know about future administrations. And for those of you who remember the administration, maybe they would have been okay on this issue, but after 9/11, the Department of Justice didn't really give a damn about civil rights for anybody, and certainly not for people with disabilities. And, right now under the Biden administration, they're limited, but they're pretty good. But, who knows? I don't want to get into who knows what we're going to have, but we're going to have to really, I think, we're going to have to rethink our reliance on the courts. Not to say that the courts aren't important and don't have a role to play, but if we want power, we're going to have to take power through the political process. And I'm not suggesting that is an easy thing in any way, shape, or form to do. It will be difficult. It will be time consuming. It's also going to require changing the culture because we haven't done that enough. One of the things that I always felt was lacking were alliances between us and the senior citizens community because of all the commonality of interests that we have, certainly concerning nursing facilities. And I started feeling that way back in the late 90s. Well, now I'm one of those seniors. I'm 64. And I hang around with, well, people my age tend to be okay on this, but I look at certainly my mother and my late mother and that generation and people who are a little older than us. What I realize is they don't want to be affiliated with us because it's still too stigmatizing to do it. People who become age-related, who require, for lack of a better term, age-related disabilities, don't want to be identified as having a disability. And I don't know how you change that but I think we need to, because I think it's an alliance we need to have. There's a lot of power and frankly, there's a lot of money among seniors. And I think we need to find a way to tap into that. And it goes both ways. They need to do it too, because too many people, way too many people are rotting in nursing homes in New York State and around the country. And certainly, New York likes to say we're proud, we're leaders, we're progressive. We're not progressive on nursing homes. We're an absolute freaking disaster on nursing homes. We have per capita far more people in nursing homes, I think, certainly than any large state, including Florida, which you would think would have more. And I won't go on my diatribe about what life is like, if you can call it a life in the nursing home or facility for most people. But I think that's really the next frontier.
Yeah, I'll give you a perfect example of this. I was attending my cousin's wedding, and my 98-year-old grandfather, he is now using a motorized scooter, and I was wondering how he was going to get into the venue because there's not a great access point. And I asked my aunt, who said, "Oh, well, there is a ramp, but he'll never use it because he doesn't want to deal with that. He'd rather just essentially show how strong he is and have people help him up the steps." And that just really has stayed with me. Shelly, and I know that you're just getting your feet on the ground here in New York and starting the work on the Olmstead plan. So talk about your vision and how people can be part of the process.
Sure. Well, I also just want to join Sim and what he was talking about too, about the inner fighting that we seem to be having for resources. Like we have the seniors that are fighting the disability community. And one thing we all have to figure out is that we do have to come together, because the disability community is often written off as a voting bloc, and the seniors are seen as a huge voting bloc. So even though they're both going to be using the same sort of services, pulling from the same resource pools, we are not getting together and saying, you know what, if I need a ramp when I'm 65, I'm going to need a ramp when I'm 85, or whatever those resources may be. But I may need that ramp when I'm 60 before I have Medicare available to me. So I need to make sure that I am taking care that we are building for the future for me before I have to have I become impoverished by my medical conditions, because that's what younger people with disabilities have. Now, we do have the Medicaid buy-in, which has been great. That's a great idea. And certainly the federal government's in big support of that. But I do think that that is an issue that we have to discuss. And I also just want to say, the other piece of this is that I attended, one of the first things I did was I got involved with the MPA, Master Plan on Aging, work groups. And all of you that attended them, there were like 8,500 work groups. So we had quite a few. The team did a great job. The department did a great job trying to find all of the pieces that needed to be put together to be able to build those plans. But on a couple of them that I sat on, the leaders had never even talked about the Centers for Independent Living. And that was a shock to me because, of course, my history is with the Centers for Independent Living here in Minnesota, and what great value they bring to all ages of individuals with disabilities and their families. So, making sure too that we're always engaging with them, and that's a big issue of mine, is making sure. It was the first outreach I did, was to make sure that I made a connection with this community. So to get to your question about the vision, I definitely I definitely see the vision of the work is more empowerment, more, we have to do some of the heavy lifting ourselves. Some of that's voting and getting involved politically. Some of that is how am I able, as a parent, even though it's very hard, how am I working to make sure that I'm educating my child through this K-12 experience or K through age 22 experience to come out with a job and job skills for competitive integrative employment? Am I able to access those services? And if not, how do I find out how to do that? How can we make the exchange of information to help people understand how to get that information? And also, I think that we need to acknowledge, and I'm kind of glad we're on Zoom right now, so nobody can throw things at me. But I do think that we do have to acknowledge that, I have met an awful lot of state agency staff who want to do better work. And they are struggling to find ways of doing that. And I am hopeful that through the integration, through the work that I'm doing to bring them to the table as well. We have 8 subcommittees on the MISC now that are focusing on a variety of topics that impact people with disabilities, technology, housing, housing stabilization services, employment options. There are 2 others, and I'm very sorry, I'm forgetting them off the top of my head. But we're looking at bringing more people with internal and external stakeholders together to help to develop some of these new ideas and publish them in public through the MISC, which is the one vehicle that everybody can get to, especially through this new virtual environment. And really try to give the state agencies some opportunity to say, oh, I think I could do that, or we could find a way to do that. And I do think, because when I came in and I talked to them about what had been published previously, their number one complaint to me was, we were never involved. Nobody ever came to us and said, what can we do? What can you do? What would you like to do? They were never involved. So they disengaged from all of that work early on. And honestly, I don't think I could really blame them. So I'm hopeful. My vision is to try to bring all of these parties together. Is the first plan in a number of years going to be everything that everybody wants? I'm gonna be as transparent as I can. Probably not everything that you want, but that doesn't mean that we can't get there, because the plan is designed to be a fluid, annualized review opportunity. So as goals are achieved, as SMART goals are achieved, and we've met those goals, we can off-ramp them and we can put new goals in the plan. And every year we have that opportunity to do that. And bringing more people to the table to have those discussions, I think, will bring about this opportunity. And I know from the lessons learned here in Minnesota, when I was out here, is that was the number one complaint. We never saw ourselves. So the community didn't see themselves in the plan, and the state agencies really didn't either. These were not things that they wanted to be tracking. So I hope I answered enough. That it's a 3-prong approach. And,
For sure. I've got a follow-up for you though,
Sure.
Shelly. And that has to do with, and let me just address the elephant in the Zoom. Obviously, the proposals, thank you, Sim. I didn't sleep last night because I was thinking of that pun.
Okay.
But the elephant in the Zoom has to do with what was proposed in the budget relating to the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program, or CDPAP. And while I know you can't comment on what's currently happening, because really, as we all know, it's kind of all speculatory at this point. What can people do? How can they voice their concerns or convey whatever concerns they have to you and the Chief Disability Office to make sure that CDPAP is protected and, dare I say, even strengthened?
Well, I think the best thing to do is to continue on with the work that all of the ILCs are promoting, that you're gathering information from your consumer base and you're sharing the information with the with Kim Hill-Redley, the director of the center of the Chief Disability Officer office. And I think that right now there is a procurement process going on, and that really has to work itself out. And as long as you keep informing individuals who are those decision makers through Kim's office, I think that right now is what we can do. I wish I had more to offer, but I don't. And I'm sorry about that.
Sure. And it's one of those questions where I couldn't do the webinar
I
panel
understand.
here without asking, and
I understand.
you know, and it's just, look, it's just a tough spot for everyone. It really is,
Yes, it really
including you.
is. Yeah. And hopefully, as we get through this process, we'll all come to a meaningful way to either figure out what our next steps are. But I do believe that the next steps will involve a larger audience of people. That would be my hope. And, you know, I would certainly advocate for that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sim and Cliff, I'm going to give you each a couple of minutes. Sim, starting with you to respond to
Sure.
what Shelly's had to say here.
Well, thank you, Shelly. That is good to hear. The MISC has been around for a while. In fact, I think I had some involvement in getting the law passed that established it. And some good ideas have come out of it. But going back to some earlier comments, what was that famous line? You know, money from This Is Spinal Tap. Money talks, bullshit walks. These ideas without resources behind them are, you know, it's wallpaper, really. I mean, it helps a bit. I think the culture has changed, and I think this has contributed to it with the culture within state agencies. I remember, and I know Cliff remembers, when everything was completely medicalized. And when you talk to people within the Department of Health in 1992 about the dignity of risk and autonomy, people looked at you like you had 3 heads and had no idea. And they were like, we have to keep them safe. We have to keep them safe. They have to be safe. I mean, that was all. And putting aside the fact that you're not safe in a facility, but that was the mantra. So things have changed in that respect. But Shelly, I guess what I would ask is, if there's any way you can do it, get that point across within the state. Put the resources behind it, and if you don't, you're not really doing it. Number one. The second thing, I want to go back to Shelly said earlier when she mentioned the areas that we need to address. When she mentioned guardianship, which is an area near and dear to me. In fact, I'm doing a training tomorrow at Lace's office on the subject. And what I would ask, and I know I've been working with people on this for years, is get rid of that horrible Article 17A guardianship statute that is just for people with developmental disabilities, traumatic brain injuries. It's an abomination. It's archaic. It does not reflect reality. And I know I have worked with them myself and helped brought legal cases to get guardianships removed for people who are able to function very well and had guardians appointed to them with their appearance waived. The judge said, oh, they don't even have to be in court, and then issued the guardianship because some psychologist or psychiatrist said it might cause them some stress to hear it. So why don't we? And you think about what guardianship is. It's the loss of your most basic civil rights if it's a full plenary guardianship. And we have another guardianship statute that, it's not perfect, Article 81 of the Mental Hygiene Law. At least it provides real due process when done correctly, and it can be tailored to the needs of the individual. It's not all or nothing, which is pretty much what 17A is. So Shelly, and for those of you out there who look at guardianship issues, work to get this statute either revised or amended tremendously, or better yet, just eliminated. There shouldn't be separate guardianship statutes based on your type of disability.
Cliff, I'll give you a couple of minutes here to respond to what Shelly and Sim have had to say. You're muted still. I told you all you have to do is just
There
hit a
you go.
button. There you
All
go.
right. So first of all, I agree with everything that's been said, and I really agree with Sim's analysis of things, and to go back to some of the points that Tim had made. I started to think about the reasons that President Richard Nixon gave when he didn't want to pass the Rehabilitation Act. So the three basic reasons were: one, that it changed the nature of the book, because before the Rehabilitation Act, it was the Voc Rehab Act from 1922, and concentrated really just on getting people employed. The 1973 Rehab Act, of course, changed that because of 504. His second thing was that it costs too much. But the third reason was very interesting. His third reason for not wanting to sign it, he said, because it would give people with disabilities too much power. It would give them too much autonomy. He was actually against that. Just to show you the kind of the progress that we've made. Unfortunately, I think we're slipping back into that. And that's part of the dangers that I'm seeing. And I know that I sound very pessimistic, but I'm a very optimistic person. But I like to think that I look at things very realistically. And unfortunately, my realistic analysis of the situation that we're moving into is not very good. There's way too much splintering, as we've talked about too here. There's way too much splintering among the very people who can make a difference here, among people with disabilities themselves who are not united. And then there's the issue about whether we should be uniting with the older Americans, such as I am. I'm going to be 70 in October, so I'm clearly in that category and live my life, my whole life with a disability, who's dealt with barriers put in front of me and all kinds of issues that were not exactly positive. But I still am I'm a very positive person. I really believe that that if we get together, we can change all of this, and we can make things really, really happen. It's just that we need to get ourselves together again. And a very good example of how getting together and coalescing into coalitions, coalitions of groups coming together, the passage of the ADA was a perfect example of that. There are many other miracles actually that occur as to why the ADA passed that I won't get into because we don't have the time. But clearly one of them was the fact that many different groups of people work together, groups of people that never worked together to make this happen, and they made it happen because they were all working together. Also, as Sim, I believe, has said before about the sort of the complacency, I think that we've got into, that's become a problem. And I think that the powers that be, I think, has taken, because I do believe more about people taking action very actively as opposed to things just happening, taking advantage of the facts that we have become complacent. And that's why I think it's partly the reason why the road has gone a bit skewed towards, I said, towards the dark side.
For sure. Before I get back to the outline, Alex, do we have any questions in the Q&A box?
We have 2 comments, Blaze.
Okay,
Would you like me to read those?
please do. Yes.
Okay. The first comment is New York State OPWDD is a prime offender with respect to the type of paternalism that Shelly's talking about. Their idea of stakeholder engagement is basically a joke.
Yep.
Their self-congratulatory performance at the last MISC meeting was disturbing to family stakeholders. The second comment, RE the single FI fiasco. The next step should be withdrawing the proposal and going back to square one with full engagement of the affected community.
Okay, Alex, thank you very much. Does anyone want to respond to either of those comments?
Well, let me just say that I'm not muted, right? That it speaks to exactly what we've been talking about in terms of the first comment about the DD population. We literally almost think of people, not almost, we literally think of people with developmental disabilities as almost a separate group, which is already a mistake and a problem, right? We're all together on this. We all have disabilities and we're all suffering as a result of the barriers that have been put in front of us by the rest of society. And so that is also another tool that has been used to keep us divided, to give more money to one group of people. That will ensure then that since they have more money, they're not going to ally with us because they could possibly lose that money and so on and so forth. So that's my comment about that.
And I completely agree with you on that, Cliff. I know, we have a lot of communities that pit against each other right now. We have the autism community that has overwhelmed a lot of base services and resources. And, again, it's very hard to say, oh, you deserve it and you don't, when instead we should be looking at what's the overall benefit of these services and resources and how can we, there is customization opportunities, but it shouldn't be just like, well, 17A is a bad example, but I don't have another, we shouldn't be classifying people by disability type unless it's exactly needed, such as Braille. Braille services are truly for one type of disability, but outside of that, all these other services and resources can be used amongst multiple disabilities. So are we incorporating opportunities to bring all of those pools of resources together to serve a variety of people? I don't know if that's happening right now. And again, I want to keep going back to the FI thing. I know that, there's resolution that wants to be had by the community. I just am not the person that can do that for everybody right now. And so I guess I don't want to duck. I just don't have the answers for it. So so with that.
Yeah, and I can objectively say I don't think you're ducking by saying you don't have the answers for that. Go ahead, Sam.
Well, starting with the FI issue, just to be clear, I think there were two issues. One was the substantive plan that was proposed for the FIs, and the other, and perhaps the more significant one, was the way our community was basically ambushed with it when we should have been part of the discussion from day one. And that, I think, reflected very poorly on, frankly, the administration. I think the other kind of elephant in the room, and I know this from dealing with OPWDD and litigation for years, is New York, I'll just be blunt, under Andrew Cuomo became as top-down as a top-down government could possibly be. I think it had a couple of effects. One, the agencies all felt like they needed like a pass to go to the bathroom, really. Everything was coming from the second floor. Two, to the extent that you have dynamic people who care at agencies, it absolutely demoralized and deflated those people because they felt like nothing they did was going to make a difference because everything was coming from the second floor. The second floor's main goal, it seemed, with OPWDD and with the whole implementation of managed care was to control costs by creating the fiction that that it's not our problem anymore because we're establishing these entities, either managed care organizations or whatever they were doing. It's escaping me now with OPWDD, which is a world unto itself. And then basically, throwing their hands up in the air and saying, sorry, there's no resources. Well, the law is very clear. The state always is ultimately, responsible. But by having all of these intermediaries, which frankly suck more resources out of the system, they were able to at least have some predictability. And I think that's all, the Cuomo administration wanted with Medicaid was predictability and if not lowering costs, at least controlling how much they were increasing, because it's expensive. There's no question. Medicaid is expensive. I mean, no one completely understands why Medicaid is like twice as expensive in New York as it is in most other states. That's a subject for another day. But OPWDD, compared to most other agencies, is very rich, is relatively richly resourced. In fact, I've heard people like, I'll mention his name, Bruce Darling, talk many times about, you know, why do they have all the resources? Why can't we have it? And yet, despite those resources, we have lots of people with developmental disabilities who are, while they're not in the, you know, the Willowbrook type disgusting developmental centers with 6,000 people, they're still languishing in facilities. We did a case at Disability Rights New York, which is still going on. And now I'm sure this is about its 6th or 7th year going on, involving people who with developmental disabilities that were sent to out-of-state schools, aged out of the out-of-state schools, and remain well into their 20s, living in schools for, you know, school-age kids, because New York, nobody can serve them. None of the agencies don't have the resources to do it. The state's unwilling to do it, and people just languish for years out of state, away from people that they love and want to see. And there's no escaping the fact is that we need to do it smartly, but we need to put the resources there to do what needs to be done. It's not, words are not going to do it alone. So those are my thoughts.
And I can share with you one of the questions that you asked is, how are we going to get there? And words don't matter, or words are not, you know, actions and words have to align. I think that was the question. But one of the things that we will be doing is that part of what was generated in 2013 under the Cuomo plan, they were a bunch of ideas. These are things that we should be doing, that we ought to be doing, that with no resources, no plan to get there, no actual pathway to create an opportunity for an agency to absorb the work. One of the things that we will, or that our next Olmstead plan will actually have, are SMART goals for every one of those ideas. So we will be able to track those, and they will be open annually. We will be looking at the progress of each one of those goals by agency or agencies, whoever are assigned with completing those tasks, and measure whether or not they're making progress. If they're not, why? If they are, well, maybe we can accelerate how quickly they can get to their end so that we can offload it and bring a new goal on. So I think that as the plan evolves year over year, you're going to see a lot of new initiatives come to the table that we never had room for before, because people were sitting there trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to do with this idea? And then they just kick the can down the road. So this new plan that we're coming up with will have a SMART goal for every one of these ideas, or what were called formally recommendations. We will actually have a goal set up. So I hope everybody finds that valuable. And I think again, public comment on that through the MISC meetings, the public meetings, I think will go a long way to help the agencies understand the impact of some of those decisions that they made, and where that progress is being viewed by the community. So I hope that's helpful to everybody.
Well, if I may, Shelly, not that this is something you can control at all, but you mentioned about agencies working together and doing what they need to do. However, I think, again, there's nothing, I don't think there's not anything within your control, but there needs to be some severe penalties for entities that do not do what they're supposed to be doing. And I think personally, that's one of the biggest problems is the enforcement of, because we have a lot of good laws, we really do, but they need to be enforced, and there needs to be some real consequences when agencies or entities do not comply with the things that they should comply, and we don't have that.
Just so this is, oh, could I say something?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, just a little history. When the ADA was passed, like a lot of other civil rights
I
statutes.
apologize. My laptop died, so I just had to steal the headset here from Cliff. Alex, do we have anything in the comments here?
We have more, yeah, we just have more, we have comments, and I think there's 2 questions.
Okay, go ahead and read those out.
Okay, from Susan, those of us using OPWDD's self-directed services are also extremely concerned about moving CDPA to a single FI. Rob is asking, is this webinar for New York State or the country? Rob is also asking about, why are the FIs going to be in New Jersey? That doesn't make sense to me. And then Mike Volkman has a comment about, is it obvious that somebody from the nursing home lobby got to the governor, not following through on priorities she made when she first took office? The new policy for eligibility for long-term care violates ADA 504 and Olmstead and will end up costing 3 to 4 times as much as home care. It is important for her advisors on staff to advise her as strongly as possible to change the policy the other way to meet our needs. And then Rob is saying Medicaid redesign has been nothing but a failure.
For sure. All right, I'm going to pose a final question to the panel that all 3 of you can actually hear, and then I'm going to give this headset back to Cliff. Oh, okay. I may have missed that. I'm going to quote Tony Coelho, who helped author the ADA. I heard him say this the other day at a White House event. Give me the right to give me the opportunity to succeed, but also give me the right to fail. What does that quote mean to you? And since I have to pass this off to you, Cliff, I'm going to have you answer it first.
Well, at least from my point of view, it has some significance because when I used to do the client assistance program, the client assistance program helps individuals with vocational rehabilitation services to ensure that they get the services they need. But what was interesting about that is I remember so many times discussing with VR about that people with disabilities have a right to fall. They have a right to fail. The VR agency always felt that somehow they were their parents and they needed to ensure their safety by ensuring that nothing bad will happen to them. But my response has always been to that: you cannot learn if you do not have some failures. If you're always succeeding, you will never learn anything. So that's my thoughts on that. Or I just one more thing. Just keep in mind. Well, not keep in mind. Pat Wright, Pat Wright has been considered the mother of the ADA, one of the mothers, along with Elizabeth Savage. But so Pat Wright said one time that what the ADA is all about is for people with disabilities to have access to the same lousy services everyone else has access to.
Okay, I think I am back. There we go. And okay, we have 5 minutes left here. So Sim and then Shelly.
Well, I mean, what that comment is, it's basically the dignity of risk. But I mean, to make it more concrete, I've had discussions with my daughter, who's in her 30s now, and other people of her generation. And I've said to them, I said, part of life is being miserable. You have to accept the fact that you're going to be miserable, and that if you do it right, you'll grow from it. It's not going to be pleasant, though. It's going to suck. And people with disabilities need to have those experiences. We all do. And even though you, especially if you're a parent, I mean, nobody wants to see someone they care about in pain, but some degree of it is necessary. I mean, obviously not a degree that's going to kill you or have, impair you for your life, and your whole life shouldn't be miserable, but some of it is necessary. And I think that's what Tony Coelho was getting at. We can't protect people with disabilities from themselves. We're not doing them any favors at all. We're not doing us any favors.
All right, Shelly, put a bow on it.
Well, I hope I can. Here's one that I always love to use. And it's with regards to, again, one of my stories about my own kids. But when my son was 14, I got him a bus pass. And everybody thought he was crazy. My son is on the spectrum. And everybody thought I was crazy. They were like, "You're gonna let him ride the bus?" I'm like, "Yeah, my tax dollars pay for it. It's going to the Mall of America and it's coming back. It's not, you know." And they're like, "Yeah, but you know, something could happen on the bus." I said, "Yeah, and something could happen on walking to the grocery market or riding his bike there." And what I found was that every single time he took his bus pass and he went someplace and came back successfully, there was a little piece of him that was different. And it was because I trusted him to take the risk, to do it, and to come back. And he can get anywhere in the city of Minneapolis. We live in Minneapolis right now while I'm waiting to move out to New York. He can get anywhere he wants to be at any time, including, hang on to your hats, everybody. He even will take a bus at 11 o'clock at night to get home from someplace that he's visiting a friend, and will come home and be able to do it. And I don't think about it. I don't worry about it because I know he's learned to make good decisions about how to get on and off the bus. And I just think that, like both of you said, if we don't allow people with individuals with disabilities to have the right to choose a risk, what kind of life are we offering people? Being happy all the time, that's not a choice. What do you do if you're not happy? Well, then you have a little outburst and then the parents freak out and saying, "Oh, I can't handle it. I can't handle it." Well, outbursts are part of life too. You know, so maybe it's an opportunity for everybody to grow a little bit. So I'm just a firm believer that, all of us have bad days. And just because you're a person with a disability doesn't mean that you're exempt from that. So, that's is that a big enough bow?
That is
Oh,
the
so.
perfect bow. That is a beautiful bow to end this on.
Yes.
Cliff, Shelly, and Sim, I cannot thank each of you enough for being so generous with your time and insights here on Olmstead. And you've made it very clear that we all have a lot of work to do, and together we can make the change we want to see. So again, this is Blaze Bryant. The recording will be made available later on here on our website, and as well as on YouTube, because the YouTube video has the ASL and CART, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank the interpreters and captioner as well, and to Alex for spotlighting them and temporarily taking over the ship when my computer died. So with all of that said, thank you all very much, and have a great...
If I may quickly, I just want to thank you, Shelly. I don't know you, but you sound really, really good. And I feel very confident that for having you in the position that you're in. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. Very, very happy.
We're thrilled to have you, and have a great rest of the day, everyone. And we'll be in touch.
Take care, everyone.
Well,
Bye-bye now.
Bye.